lush greenlands to the cascading waterfalls. Wonders of the world, the oldest habitat of territories on Earth. A rich cultural heritage. A continent of 1.1 billion people. Second largest and most populous. A continent pregnant with possibilities. Home to 30% of Earth's mineral resources. 50% of its people under 25 years. Africa, the land of the great. Our spirit resilient. Our enterprise profitable. Our future inspiring. Africa is inspiring. Be inspired.
I'm going to be speaking to you about personal identity branding. And the first question I'm going to ask you is, are you a brand? Do you think you need a brand? And I'm sure right now most people are thinking, no, I don't. Actually, if you're in public office, you're a high cadre officer, in fact, if you're aspiring to be somebody, then yes, you do need a brand. And I'll give you the best definition of branding that I've heard. And it says, your brand is what people say about you when you're not in the room. It's the indelible impression you leave in people's consciousness. That's your brand. So, do you want to leave that to chance? Or do you want to be deliberate about the brand that you're exuding or the brand that you have? I'm going to ask you a few questions. And the first is, define yourself with one word. What would it be? The second is, if you ask the people around you to define you with one word, what would it be? The third thing is, do those two words coincide, or are they far apart from each other? Because your brand is not what you say about yourself, but is what people perceive about you. And I'll just give you a few things that your brand is made up of. First of all, it is made of your personal image. It is made of your personal reputation, your professional reputation, your character, and I dare say in this day and age, your social media representation. The first thing people notice when they meet you is your personal appearance. So your grooming, your posture, the way you sound, the way you speak, the way you smell. Yes, the way you smell. And all those things affect the five senses. So already they're making an impression about you. They say it takes 2 to 3 seconds to make a first impression. And they say it takes 13 encounters to change an unfavorable first impression. So at that point, I think I should have convinced you that you have to be deliberate, that you made the first impression the right one at the first meeting. How do you introduce yourself when you meet people? Do you confidently tell them your first name and your surname, and then you tell them what you do? Or do you just tell them your name and leave it at that? I think it's a habit that we need to cultivate when we're introducing ourselves. You always introduce first name, surname, and finally you tell them what you do. Secondly, do you have a 1 minute, or shall I say 30-minute statement that summarizes your profession or what you represent? Some people call it the elevator pitch. If you don't, you may want to craft one and work on it. What's your social media presence like? Are they just random photos that you put up there? Are you one of those selfie fanatics that make sure that all your photos are either having fun, partying, being seen at the right places? Then that begins to form people's perception of you. So these are things that we need to be careful about when we're crafting or branding or rebranding ourselves. Don't always wait until you find yourself in the spotlight to seek the assistance or consultation from a branding expert. Begin to think about the places you are aspiring to be and do the necessary coaching that is required for those places. Yes, it's a lot of work, but it doesn't have to happen overnight. The first thing I recommend if you're listening to this and you're taking this seriously is do a SWOT analysis and get to know yourself. What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? What are the threats to the brand you're trying to build? And what are the opportunities you can take advantage of, including resources, including people, professionals that can help you build that brand? Secondly, looking at yourself now, and you've identified that there's a distance between the brand you want to exude and where you are now. What can you change in a day? What can you change in a week? And what can you change in a month? And write them down and take it seriously. I would also advocate that you put a list of people that can help you with those goals that you're trying to achieve. Get a public speaking coach. Join an organization. Begin to learn how to project your voice, how to soften any intonations or accents that you have, how to undulate your voice. You may need to go for voice training so that you build up some timbre in your voice. Those are just some of the few things that I would recommend. We often meet very powerful public figures or celebrities, and we admire them. But one of the things I'm going to tell you is very, very few, maybe 0.5% of them were born that way. They spent a lot of time, invested a lot of finances and a lot of sleepless nights getting coached until they became that perfect image. One other question that I'm going to ask you is, what's your online presence? If you're a professional and I Google you, what am I going to find? Is it just a Facebook account, or have you got a LinkedIn account? What sort of photograph is on your LinkedIn account? Is it a professional shot that was taken in a studio? Or was it one you took at some party where you were having fun? If you're in the entertainment industry, that photograph might work for you in a social gathering having fun. But if you're a professional and you want to be taken seriously, then you've got to take a shot that exudes the image that you're trying to put out there. I'm going to ask a question, and some people have a giggle every time they hear this, but it's quite serious. It's something to think about. If 3 candidates were applying for a position in a company, and the emails come through, and the first email comes from, say, an address that is boboalai419@yahoo.com. The second email comes through from maybe an address like sexymamaG@gmail.com. And the third email address comes through, and it just says plainly Aisha Atta @hotmail.com. Which address do you think is most likely to get the sort of response that you want? But a lot of us are walking around with those Bobo Alai and Mamaji type emails in the professional world, or maybe even as public figures or even politicians. So maybe that's something we want to look at, another assignment to tweak later on after you've had this listen. I'm going to talk about your phones, your mobile phones. What's your ringtone? What's your callback tune? You know, depending on the sort of profession that you're in, there are just certain tunes I would advise you not to have on your phone, either as a ringtone or callback tone. Those are just some of the things that we might want to consider. I do hope that I've given you quite a few to think about when it comes to putting your personal identity brand together.